I'm Brittany, this is Hua Cheng, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things, and sometimes we read them. We are finishing Volume 3 of Heaven Official's Blessing today, and so far we seem to be heading towards a real interesting conclusion to this volume, so I'm just gonna go ahead and get started. Um, this isn't a live stream, as you may have noticed, but I'm pretty much by and large going to treat it like one, unless I really have to do otherwise. So, we were at, oh Lord, we were at not a convenient stopping place. I believe we were somewhere in the middle of 342. Aha, no. 343. We were in the middle towards the top of 343. Right in the middle of a lot of ghost baby drama. And we had to stop right in the middle of it. But tonight, we pretty much have as much time as we want. So, this is going to be finished. We have about 60 pages, a little bit more. So it'll be a good long, I almost said stream. That's not true. This is not streaming. I'm pre-recording this. But this will be a nice good long video. So let's settle in. Let's settle in and start towards the top of page 343. As Xie Lian expected, it seemed the ghosts in Ghost City were perfectly aware that he was from the heavenly realm. So, starting at the top, towards the top of page 343, as Xie Lian suspected, it seemed the ghosts in Ghost City were perfectly aware that he was from the heavenly realm. Lan Chung let out a shrill scream and rolled on the ground, hugging her belly as if it were no longer part of her body and was instead its own live creature, shrinking at times, swelling at others, and twisting up, down, left, right. The black smoke grew thicker. The fetus spirit must have regained some strength after recovering in its mother's womb and was ready to start trouble again. The crowd of female ghosts rallied again to hold Lan Cheng down, yet they were powerless to do so. At the sight of this predicament, the male ghosts on the left yelled, "We got this," and rushed forward to restrain her. It was complete chaos. That is where we actually left off last time. Xie Lian clenched his fists. Miss Lan Cheng, the fetus in your belly is much more powerful than you, he yelled. You clearly can't bear to hurt it, but it can hurt you. You can't do anything. It will suck you dry sooner or later and break free. Let it out now. If Lan Cheng refused to release the thing in her belly, soon she was... Oh, no. This is the translation's fault. Let me correct it. Soon she would be sucked dry and shredded to pieces by that savage spirit. This, of course, would leave Xie Lian no choice but to personally cut it out himself. Dear... Let's maybe not do that. Let's maybe not have that. If we can choose our own adventure, let's not choose that scene. Although it might be better than watching her be ripped apart by her own son, he really didn't want to do so unless there truly was no alternative. To put it fucking mildly, while he would prefer not to cut her open, he certainly couldn't let Hua Cheng do it for him. But Lan Cheng was stubborn as a mule, and even as she wailed in agony, she refused to relinquish the fetus spirit. This couldn't go on for much longer, so Xie Lian decided to take action. Xie Lian set his jaw in determination. "Excuse my imposition." However, when his hand reached for Feng Xin's hilt, Hua Cheng immediately held him back. "No need," he said darkly. A flash of golden light suddenly erupted from the center of Lan Cheng's belly, its rays blinding the ghostly crowd. They yelped loudly, fleeing to make room. What the shit? Xie Lian focused his eyes. When that golden light died down, the fetus spirit had been so desperate to burst. Things are happening. When that golden light died down, the fetus spirit that had been so desperate to burst out seemed now to be somehow fettered, and Lan Cheng's belly had flattened to its normal state. The thing holding it back was a belt on her wrist. At first glance, that belt looked quite ordinary, but when Xie Lian took a good look, he was astonished. Why would you have something like this on you? Even with its color faded from washing, Xie Lian could tell that the belt was an item of heavenly essence. Many ingenious spiritual weapons of the heavens only revealed their phenomenal abilities when protecting their masters in dire circumstances. Even though the embroidered patterns on the belt were heavily worn and damaged, Xie Lian was certain that it was an item only heavenly officials could possess. A golden belt. And by the look of its design, the belt had once belonged to a heavenly official of the upper court. What is happening? Golden belts were considered a sophisticated gift in the heavenly realm, and the act of gifting one carried a special meaning. If a male official were to gift his belt to another, it was a gesture to signify affection, and the nature of that affection was evident. Okay. All right. This world has its own version of cut sleeve. One could well imagine that something like a golden belt would not be so easily given away, and also not so easily lost. Xie Lian gaped. Miss, could your child be... He trailed off as he suddenly remembered where he was. Regardless of whether this was the lair of all evil, to inquire after the details of a woman's personal affairs in public was far from courteous. He immediately cut off. No! Lan Cheng instantly cried in response. I haven't even said anything. What are you saying no to? Xie Lian wondered. He asked instead, did you depend on this golden belt to sustain yourself throughout the past 700 or 800 years? The crowd of female ghosts were stunned to hear this. Holy shit! Lan Cheng, you're that old? Didn't you always say you're only 300 something? No, she even said she was 200 once. You're falsifying your records. The fetus spirit had about 700 or 800 years of cultivation, so its mother would of course be around the same age. However, Lan Cheng didn't possess a grudge of equal weight. The golden belt's immense spiritual powers had doubtless been instrumental in enabling her stay in the corporeal world as an ordinary ghost for so long. If the father of that fetus spirit was a heavenly official, then the degree of its savagery made sense. A heavenly official having an affair with a mortal woman. How very Zeus of them. Whether he'd ended up abandoning or neglecting her, she had met a violent end with her baby forcibly torn from her womb. Now both mother and son were of the ghost realm, and the fetus had likely murdered countless others. No matter what, this case was no less serious than the case of Xuanji. It even seemed rather similar on the surface, which made it easy to determine how best to handle it. Xie Lian looked to Hua Cheng. Senlong, this miss... No need to say more. Hua Cheng said, do what you must. You needn't ask me. Xie Lian answered softly. Upon receiving permission, he turned to Lan Cheng. All the ghosts were demanding more gossip. Lan Cheng, who's your baby's dad? What an outrage! Did he only care enough to kill it but not bury it? Care to knock you up but not raise the kid? Just who is it? You gotta avenge yourself. I mean, I kind of really want to know, who's the father? Can we go on Geraldo? Lan Cheng clenched her teeth and stared hard at Xie Lian. Who else could it be? She didn't utter the name, but Xie Lian understood. Understood what? Why don't you come back to the heavenly court with me? No! Lan Cheng immediately shouted. Of course, it was useless for her to object. Willing or not, Xie Lian had to take her away, and he hardened his expression. This fetus spirit is exceedingly violent. Who knows how much blood is on its hands? The case has become too convoluted for you to continue to shield it. This matter must be confronted and reported to the heavenly court, Xie Lian stated solemnly. If that heavenly official is an honest one, or if there was some kind of misunderstanding between you, then we can have you and your child recognized and deal with the matter of its crimes after. If that heavenly official has wronged you or worse, then there's even more reason to demand justice. No matter what, the fetus spirit is your son, but also his son. How can anyone else interfere if the father is ignorant of this affair? Oh. Get you a man who holds power accountable. The ghosts thought his speech made sense. Also, if they let Lan Cheng haul her son up to cause a riot in the heavens, how exciting would that be? The bigger the chaos, the better. So they urged her, yes, Lan Cheng, what are you afraid of? Go settle your score with that guy. If he won't recognize you, we'll burn down his temples. Xie Lian said to Hua Cheng, I will make a trip to the upper court this instant and report this case. While Lan Cheng protested, she knew she couldn't stop him. After snapping out of her shock, she suddenly knelt down and prostrated before Hua Cheng. Chengju, thank you for your kindness and grace in sheltering me. Oh, Xie Lian was taken aback. It was out of desperation that Lan Cheng set fire to Paradise Manor and broke the rules of Ghost City, she continued. I am ever so sorry. Pray Chengju will not hold it against me. She had always been a sauntering shrew, but when she spoke now, it was like she was a different person. Many of those familiar with her watched in shock, but Hua Cheng appeared unstirred, and he turned to Xie Lian. Guga stopped by in too much of a hurry. I'll wait for you to come down again and host you properly next time. Xie Lian nodded, then took Lan Cheng and rushed straight to the heavens. As he walked down the main streets of the heavenly capital, he announced in the spiritual communication array, Everyone, please make your way to the Palace of Divine Might. There is a matter that requires conference. He exited the array as soon as he was done, and didn't waste any time bringing Lan Cheng to the Palace of Divine Might. Lan Cheng was but an ordinary ghost and couldn't enter the Golden Palace, so Xie Lian waited outside with her until Junwu himself arrived and granted permission for Lan Cheng to enter. It didn't take long for the heavenly officials, who were currently present in the heavenly capital, to make their way to the hall, where they were met with the bewildering sight of a crude female ghost slathered in heavy makeup. She stood in stark contrast to the transcendence of the heavenly court. A black-clad heavenly official strolled in, and he paused for a moment when he saw what was in the center of the hall. This was Hua Cheng. Lan Cheng also glanced at him and immediately lowered her head, her lips quivering. No. Hua Cheng showed no further reaction and only asked impassively, Your Highness, who is that woman? At this address, Lan Cheng's face changed. Oh, Hua Cheng, no. She looked at Xie Lian as if she were recalling something that she wasn't entirely sure of. Just then, both the Wind and Water Masters arrived. The pair of brothers looked quite similar to each other with their matching fans and white robes gently fluttering. They painted a beautiful picture. Shi Qingxuan fanned himself as he spoke. Yeah, Temple Master, why did you bring a lady ghost here today? Xie Lian was puzzled. Temple Master? What Temple Master? Of Pucci Shrine? Why the sudden address? Then he realized Shi Qingxuan probably meant Master of Thousand Lights Temple. He didn't know how to acknowledge the title and could only pretend he hadn't heard it. But Shi Qingxuan was cheerful as he greeted everyone around him, then turned to the ghost. Huh? The ghost Gigi has something in her belly. Why do I have the feeling that it's... He wondered aloud as he approached, looking like he wanted to touch her. Shi Wudu snapped his fan shut. Qingxuan! Shi Qingxuan's hand instantly shrank back, and he tried to justify himself. I just thought there was an aura of evil, and wanted to see if there was something dangerous. Shi Wudu continued to scold him. You're a man and a heavenly official. This is the Palace of Divine Might. How could you do something so unmannerly? No, don't turn into a woman either. Even in a woman's form, it's equally disgraceful. Change back right this instant. Ling Wen shook his head. He folded a stack of documents and reports under his arm and approached to place his hand on Lan Cheng's belly. After a moment, he dropped his hand and hummed. What a vicious fetus spirit. How many hundreds of years old? 700 or 800, Xie Lian answered. He gave an account of the 2 times he had met the fetus spirit, and how the fetus spirit's attack on a pregnant woman led him to find the female ghost Lan Cheng. He didn't bring up the details of Hua Cheng and Ghost City, and Lan Cheng herself naturally remained quiet on the subject. At the end, Xie Lian concluded, and that's how it came to be. I don't know if that heavenly official is still in this world, or still working with us, nor whether there is some misunderstanding in all this, nor whether he knew. That's why I brought this miss here. Feng Xin knitted his brows. If there wasn't a misunderstanding, and he knew about the mother and child, then it's simply irresponsible of him to leave them like that without a word. Pei Ming crossed his arms and commented leisurely, I completely agree with General Nanyang. This is far too irresponsible. Don't know which heavenly colleague this discarded baggage belongs to, but if he's on duty, he best come forward. Wow. Discarded baggage. Tell us what you really think. As he finished, he felt countless eyes on him. Silence had descended upon the palace of divine might. Wait. When she said, who else could it be? And Xie Lian immediately understood. Now the first thing coming to mind is that one heavenly official who really gets around. I can't remember who it is, though. I'm blanking on who it was, but there was totally a heavenly official that they've talked about who's just a major slut. Was it Pei Ming or Pei Ming adjacent? Hang on. A moment later, Pei Ming wondered aloud, are you all having some sort of misunderstanding about me? Shi Qingxuan stopped fanning his fan. I don't think it's a misunderstanding, more like we know you too well. Pei Ming immediately defended himself. It wasn't me. Everyone laughed dryly, and even Shi Wudu and Ling Wen looked unconvinced by his denial. Pei Ming grew frustrated, and he supported his temple with his hand as he explained earnestly. Well, I've had some flings with women of the ghost realm before, but I really don't recognize this one. If those words of his were to be taken seriously, they were believable. How could the man himself not know with whom he shared a past? Many criticized Pei Ming's promiscuity, but he had never denied any affairs and never denounced anything he'd done. It wasn't like he couldn't afford it. Unless they behaved like Xuanji, women who had affairs with him were lavished with wealth and sweetness. They were all guaranteed a lifetime of riches and care until they no longer wanted to associate with him. If Lan Cheng truly had a fleeting affair with Pei Ming while she was alive, she shouldn't have suffered having her womb ripped open and her son stolen from her, or his becoming a vicious ghost. Besides, Pei Ming had high standards when it came to women. He only dallied with those of extraordinary appearance, and he also preferred beauties with a natural look. As everyone in the hall could see, Lan Cheng wore such a heavy layer of makeup that her real features were indiscernible, and her general looks, class, and behavior were a far cry from the lovers Pei Ming usually chose. So when he claimed he wasn't to blame, everyone silently somewhat believed him, except it was only silently and somewhat. When an occasion to see General Pei get checkmated presented itself, how could they not indulge in the fun? And so they stood by and watched him argue with smiles on their faces. Whether any member of the crowd was convinced depended entirely on their current mood. At first, Xie Lian also thought the father was more than likely Pei Ming. He had a track record, after all. But as he studied Pei Ming's expression, Xie Lian grew less certain. Pei Ming didn't seem to be lying. He recalled Hua Cheng saying that there was nothing to fear, as Pei Ming wasn't a shady fellow, or something along those lines. After some contemplation, Xie Lian continued, Miss Lan Cheng originally responded ambiguously, asking who else could it be, so I also assumed. But since General Pei denies such claims, maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Besides, it can't be the same person every time, so why don't we ask around? Unexpectedly, Lan Cheng spoke up. It's not him. Xie Lian was taken aback and turned to her. It's not him, Lan Cheng repeated. Ling Wen said coolly, What, so it's not? Shi Wudu also politely said, So it actually isn't. Pei Ming turned to Shi Wudu and Ling Wen. I already said it wasn't. The two of you are adding insult to injury. Just you wait. The heavenly officials were briefly disappointed, but then they grew even more excited. After all, Pei Ming was always the one generating wanton scandals. If it were him, this would be nothing new. But if he wasn't to blame, that meant there was likely another male official, present or not, who had instigated a new wave of excitement. How could they not be thrilled? I love that the first big thing that I have picked up on anyway, that is a commonality between the heavenly realm and the ghost realm, is love of drama. That tickles me for several reasons. Earlier in Ghost City, Lan Chang had hinted that the man in question was Pei Ming, but now she denied it. Xie Lian felt something was amiss, but he made no effort to express his suspicion. Then who is it? He inquired. Lan Chang stared squarely at him, her eyes unmoving. You! Xie Lian thought she wasn't finished. What about me? I said, the man is you, Lan Chang declared. What do you mean? That's my cat, literally right next to the mic. He's laying here on my desk. What do you mean? What? Yeah, I don't know what he means. Or she means. I don't know what this book means. This is very clearly, well, I mean, that was the end of a chapter, but like, I don't know. She, pristine virgin Lian, he hasn't even been, plowed by Hua Cheng yet. He is as pure as the driven snow. I don't know why we're, what? If Lan Cheng, oh sorry, we're at chapter 47, called Impetuous Matches. None admits, hang on, say this 10 times fast. None admits amidst conflicted laughter. That was some English language cruelty right there. If Lan Chang had declared something like, the one who killed me was you, it still wouldn't have been as much of a bolt out of the blue. Xie Lian was practically knocked out by her thunderbolt. Me? Upon the throne, even Junwu's hand seemed to have slipped from its usual spot, supporting his temple. The heavenly officials were shocked into silence, and they immediately turned their heads towards the emperor. However, Junwu's hand had quickly righted itself, and he had already resumed his usual somber pose with his head on his hand. The officials turned their heads back to Xie Lian. Was this it? The third banishment to manifest before the eyes of all? Xie Lian felt his soul shaking, and he forced himself to swallow the habitual, I can't get erect alibi, which almost escaped through his teeth. That was only ever an offhand comment used to easily excuse himself, not appropriate for deployment in circumstances such as these. Besides, there was already private gossip circulating the upper court about various martial gods and their attitudes towards women. When Feng Xin saw women, he respectfully stayed far away, and Lang Chanchu blushed the moment he saw them. Mu Qing refused to even acknowledge ugly women, and while Pei Shu was expressionless when he saw women, who knew what was actually going through his head? Quan Yi Zhen didn't ever seem to have women on his mind, but Pei Ming's was constantly consumed by them. If Xie Lian tried his usual excuse now, no doubt his name would be added to this list. Miss Lan Chang, please calm yourself, Xie Lian pleaded earnestly. There is definitely no such possibility. Lan Chang was glaring so hard her eyes were larger than bells. Yes, there is. It's you, the Crown Prince of Shenlei. My cat agrees. Wow. Even though this woman had died after Xie Lian's first ascension and the timing could perhaps match up, wouldn't the man himself know better than anyone whether he'd met her before? Amidst the circulating whispers, Xie Lian's expression and tone grew solemn. Miss, I may not be a saint, but I still know a faithful heart. If I did not love someone, I would never cross any such lines with them, he said sternly. If I did, I would never allow that person to suffer any speck of grief, even if I had to beg and collect scraps or busk and perform on the streets to support my family. You are in the Palace of Divine Might. Do not speak falsehoods. Shi Qingxuan piped up as well. If it really was His Highness who committed such a deed, why would he bring this ghost Gigi to the heavens to confront everyone? And why has Miss Lan Chang only now recognized him? Just think about it. It makes no sense. It don't. It really doesn't. She just gets up here and then turns around and says, you know, Maury, that's the father? Like, I don't... It was easy to see as much, but with such a spectacle to be had, who cared? The crowd maintained a reserved attitude, and an official even blindly hypothesized, perhaps His Highness lost his memory, so he doesn't remember the things he's done. Honestly, it's more believable that he's bold enough to think she wouldn't recognize him after 800 years. Xie Lian was speechless and cautioned the crowd. My lords, to prove something is impossible by fabricating something even more inconceivable is a dangerous path to walk. And yet I feel like we just touched on the origin of a lot of conspiracy theories. Feng Xin looked like he wanted to say something, but also like he couldn't make up his mind. In the end, he remained silent. Junwu cleared his throat. Shenlei, how many golden belts did you once have in your possession? Xie Lian put his hand to his forehead. Too many. At least 10. Mu Qing answered flatly, over 40, each with different embroidery and patterns. He only realized the comment was inappropriate after the words left his lips, and he quickly shut up. Instantly, some of those present remembered that Mu Qing had been Xie Lian's personal attendant and taken care of his daily needs, which was how he knew such details. Many of the officials couldn't help but think, counting golden belts alone, over 40. This highness, as the crown prince, really had once lived an extraordinary luxurious life. Even Xie Lian himself felt rather embarrassed when thinking on it. Back then he'd changed into a different extravagant ensemble every day, and his belts had changed every time to match whatever outfit he wore. Unlike now, where in an entire year he only wore 3 sets of clothing over and over again. Those 3 sets all looked exactly the same, too. At a cursory glance, people likely thought him so poor that he only had 1 set of clothing at all. Junwu asked Xie Lian, and where are they now? Do you remember? Xie Lian and Feng Xin were both stumped. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead. Not really. We're discussing things from 800 years ago, after all. I've long forgotten where they disappeared to. So who on earth took one of his belts? It wasn't because they had been tossed out. At the time, he and Feng Xin often pawned things off whenever their funds grew tight. Too many things had been sold off, and he really couldn't remember whether any belts had been left at the end. Feng Xin didn't have the heart to discuss this subject in detail, but said nonetheless, the golden belt might not have been a gift. Perhaps it was picked up somewhere. Junwu... Wouldn't this then be implying that there were over 40 people, over 40 dudes, who were really into I'm getting that right? My cat is doing his best to destroy things and be cute at the same time. I need a cat cam so you guys can see the ridiculousness. He's sprawled right in front of me. Yes, sir. No, you may not knock the camera over. It's on a tripod. That would be bad. Where on earth? Junwu didn't seem to actually expect Xie Lian to remember either. Shenlei, I remember that your cultivation method demands a body of purity, lest your spiritual power be significantly damaged. Yes, Xie Lian confirmed. Wow, so I was right, Shi Qingxuan piped up again. Just looking at His Highness, I could tell he must have cultivated that kind of path. If that's the case, never mind knocking anyone up. I bet he's never even held anyone's hand. Xie Lian was about to say that's right, but his mind suddenly presented him with the memory of a pale, slender hand, as cool as jade. It made a striking contrast against that bright red wedding veil and a thin red thread knotted about its 3rd finger. The affirmation stuck in his throat, no longer able to roll out. Everyone in the hall stared at him intently. With one simple look, it was obvious his silence meant Shi Qingxuan's declaration was untrue. But never holding anyone's hand was too low of a standard. Even if hands had been held, it wasn't such a big deal, unless it was the supreme of the ghost realm, you know. Just possibly, maybe. I'm going out on a limb and guessing here. Shi Qingxuan immediately added, even if he's held hands, he must have never kissed anyone before. Again, Xie Lian wanted to say, that's right. But this time, endless streams of crystalline air bubbles suddenly floated before his eyes. As the translucent beads dispersed through the water, he saw an exceptionally handsome face. Eyes closed, a shapely forehead lined by a widow's peak, beautiful to behold. This time, not only was he unable to squeeze out a single word, his entire face flushed bright red. Shi Qingxuan keeps calling him out on accident. Oh, sir, no, you can't roll into that. Thank you, Dresden. Yes. No. No. There we go. He's so ridiculous. This is too good. We're at the top of page 357, by the way. Every heavenly official in the hall understood in an instant, and dry coughs sounded all around. Shi Qingxuan was starting to regret saying anything. He knocked his fan over his own head once, and secretly passed a message to Xie Lian through their private communication array. Sorry about that, Your Highness. I only wanted to convince everyone that you're really the ascetic sort, but I hadn't realized you weren't. So you've indulged in such experiences, I really couldn't tell. That last statement shattered Xie Lian's will. He choked out with difficulty. Don't say any more. That was an accident. Junwu pressed a fist against his lips, clearing his throat loudly. Very good. You have not violated your vows in these intervening years, correct? Xie Lian finally let out a breath of relief. That's right. Then this will be easy, Junwu stated. I have a sword here. Yanzhen. Yanzhen comes with a footnote. Yanzhen translates to glamorous virtue. A sword of virginity? A virgin sword. That's what I'm getting. It possesses a particular ability. Should the blood of a virgin flow upon it, it shall not be stained, but become brighter as it is washed. Take a drop of your blood and let it fall upon the blade, and we shall see the truth. Although it had been common knowledge for years that Junwu had a hobby of collecting rare and strange swords, the heavenly officials still thought to themselves, why does my lord have all these messed up swords? What's even the use in collecting them? Xie Lian himself was feeling more and more nonplussed by the situation and only wanted to end it as soon as possible. Ling Wen brought forth that sensual Yanzhen sword and immediately slid the blade across Xie Lian's hand. Countless eyes watched intently, and Shi Qingxuan clapped. Good! Case closed! Drops of blood slid past the blade, leaving not a trace behind as expected. The proof was as solid as the mountains, and the crowd could only drop the subject. Ah, I see. Well, then who could it be? Their tone was lackluster, dripping with disappointment. Ling Wen turned to Len Cheng politely. Miss, please tell us honestly the identity of the heavenly official in question. The fetus spirit in your womb is restless, and your powers aren't strong enough to contain it. Only its blood-bound father can calm and discipline it. Before he could finish, Len Cheng unexpectedly pointed at Ling Wen and cried, You! That man is you! Why is she randomly... Is she stalling for time? Like, what's going on? Ling Wen was speechless. Ling Wen had probably come directly from his temple to attend this sudden meeting and was currently in the form of a man. He was baffled to suddenly be named the child's father. The heavenly official sputtered and Pei Ming chortled. Noble Jie, did you even finish tending to your reports before you went and found a nice girl to knock up? This was probably what they called instant karma. Ling Wen shook his head and gracefully declined Shiwudu's compassionate, we have art, hang on one second, compassionate gesture of giving his good nephew a congratulatory red money pocket. Oh yeah, we got art of all of these like random accusations. Did he really just take her up to the heavenly realm and she just started pointing fingers? I mean, literally, that's what's happening. Ling Wen's expression calmed. I haven't finished, and neither do I have the time. After such a riotous back and forth, and after Lan Chang hurled accusations at a number of officials, naturally no one believed her anymore. Feng Xin couldn't watch any longer and concluded grumpily, I get it. This ghost woman was completely crazy from the start and is only here to throw blame. She's come to cause trouble on purpose. No, she's diverting attention from Ming Chu? That feels right. I'm still waiting to hear from him. Len Chang cackled, sounding more and more like a crazy hag as she continued. And if she did continue, who knew who she'd accuse next? The heavenly officials changed their tune. Yeah, who knows, maybe that golden belt was stolen. To be fair, I also have more than one golden belt. I actually can't be sure how many I have exactly, and I don't remember if I've stored them properly. Len Chang wouldn't let anyone off so easily, however. Putting her hands on her hips, she screamed at the crowd. What? Trying to get away? Too late. Not a chance. Is it you? Is it you or is it you? At this point, it was obvious she was pointing fingers randomly. Even Ming Yi, who was silently standing in a corner focusing on chewing whatever his cheeks were stuffed with, was indicted as a father at one point. It was chaos in the Great Hall, and everyone was shirking responsibility left and right. Take her away, take her away. Don't let her spout any more nonsense. Jija, you're not my type. Don't you slander me. This is downright outrageous. Junwu waved his hand, and a junior official came to collect Lan Chang. Even as she was dragged out of the Palace of Divine Might, she continued to scream and laugh shrilly. The officials within the hall returned to their assigned positions, their hearts still pounding as their heads throbbed. At first, everyone had thought the matter didn't involve them and they only came for a good show. Now they weren't so sure whether they would be the ones getting a bucket of crap dumped over their heads. They might even wind up landing themselves a new play in the mortal realm, starring alongside a ghostly lady love with gaudy makeup and a ghostly son who had murdered thousands. Sensing the danger, they all slapped their hands in exasperated helplessness. There's no way to investigate this case. I think she's simply wrong in the head. No need to investigate. It'd be a waste of time. Just lock her up. This could very well be the ghost realm mucking about on purpose. Xie Lian disagreed, however. On the way here, Miss Lan Cheng was quite self-aware. So why did she suddenly grow erratic the moment she entered the Palace of Divine Might? I'm afraid it isn't something that can be brushed off by calling her wrong in the head. Thus, the crowd broke down and divided into two sides to debate and argue. In the end, the conclusion was still that never-changing, we'll see, we'll see. After the meeting was dismissed, Xie Lian bid farewell to Shi Qingxuan, who promised he'd descend in a few days to visit and hang out, then walked out of the Palace of Divine Might sighing to himself. They say the Palace of Ling Wen is inefficient, but it can't be helped. Every time we gather to discuss anything, there's so much noise and ambiguity, and in the end, the conclusions are never concrete. How can the Palace of Ling Wen accomplish anything when this is what we give them to work with? Just then, he sensed someone approaching from behind, and he turned to see Feng Xin. Slightly taken aback, he hadn't even greeted Feng Xin before Feng Xin hastily gave him a warning under his breath. Watch out for Mu Qing. See? Did I literally call him Ching Mu earlier? No. Wow. It's 11:30 at night. I really can't remember. Xie Lian hushed his voice as well. Mu Qing? That ghost woman reacted oddly when he entered the hall, like she was afraid of him, Feng Xin said. I don't care to pry into other people's personal affairs, but in any case, watch yourself. He hurried off after having his say, leaving Xie Lian standing in place. Xie Lian waited until Feng Xin was gone before he started walking again. Even though he hadn't shown as much, Xie Lian had actually paid close attention to every heavenly official's minute behaviors, as well as Lan Chang's reactions. Naturally, he hadn't missed Mu Qing. However, he didn't think the father of the fetus spirit was likely to be Mu Qing. Xie Lian couldn't imagine him doing such a thing. Mu Qing undeniably focused his whole heart and mind on cultivation. improving his martial arts, expanding his territory, and growing his believer base. Furthermore, he and Xie Lian practiced the same cultivation method, and Mu Qing would never even consider ruining his cultivation by touching a woman. However, Mu Qing clearly knew Lan Chang. That was definitely true. But with so few clues, Xie Lian could only shake his head and descend from the heavenly court. With the fetus spirit subdued and Lang Ying and Guzi, oh man, somebody explain that pronunciation too. But I can't remember it because my short-term memory does not exist. The trio returned. Oh, nope, sorry. Hello? How did I get knocked this far off course? Ah. Lang Ying and Guzi settled in the wealthy merchant's abode with food and drink. There was nothing to worry about. Nevertheless, it wasn't good to be away for too long. If Xie Lian took his time returning, the wealthy merchant would probably start grousing about his absence. Thus, the moment Xie Lian descended, he went straight to the town of Pucci. When the wealthy merchant saw him, he immediately clutched his hands and cried out in excitement, "Dao Zhang! You're a master! A master! You slept in my concubine's chambers last night and the doors were all locked, yet this morning when we opened them, I couldn't believe my eyes. You disappeared into thin air. Strong, too strong. So, did you catch the monster?" "It is caught, don't worry. Everything is fine now," Xie Lian replied. "How are the two children I brought with me?" It was like the wealthy merchant had received absolution, and he cried joyously, "Good! They're very good kids. They didn't eat much at all. Dao Zhang, where's your Thousand Lights temple? I'm going to donate and offer my gratitude. From today onward, I will proudly wear my title as one of your temple's devotees, and let none dispute that devotion." Xie Lian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Take a shot. But no matter what, he had increased his number of worshippers. And this one was rich too, so he was feeling rather glad. He lectured the wealthy merchant on the topic of virtue, discouraged him from continuing to chase lascivious pleasures, and advised him to be more devoted and loving to his wife and family. Finally, he told him to visit Pucci's shrine on another day, after which Xie Lian left with Lang Ying and Guzi in tow. The trio returned to Pucci village. Xie Lian placed that "Please donate and help with renovations" sign in a more conspicuous spot in front of Pucci's shrine, in hopes that when the wealthy merchant came, he would see it straight away. But the moment he pushed open the doors to enter the shrine, he sensed something different about the place. As they entered the shrine, indeed, it was vastly different. The floors had been swept, the altar table and chairs wiped, the dust cleared, and even the trash in the corner had been cleaned out. It was like the river snail girl had paid a visit. Everything was too clean. Even Chirong was gone. The river snail girl has a footnote. That's a character from Chinese folklore. Once upon a time, a farmer found a giant river snail in the fields he worked. He took it home and kept it in his house. When he was out during the day, the river snail would transform into a woman and perform domestic duties, such as cleaning and cooking. Once he found out her true nature, they fell in love and lived happily ever after. Okay. Wow. Even see, Qirong being gone, though. With Qirong's disappearance, it was like the entire place had become that much more spacious and bright. Even the air had cleared somewhat. In his arms, Guzi was carrying meat pies he had especially brought from town, and when he peeked in and didn't see anyone, he grew anxious. "Daggerga, where's my dad?" Xie Lian immediately turned. He hadn't even stepped out the door before he sensed the chilling glint of an oncoming assault. He instantly drew Feng Xin to strike back. The chilling glint was struck high into the air, falling to the ground dozens of meters away. He had unsheathed Feng Xin as fast as lightning and sheathed it with equal speed. He let out a puff of breath but was immediately puzzled. That's it? No more follow-up moves? He went to inspect said chilling glint properly. After he struck, it had wound up crookedly planted in the earth. The curved silver arch seemed more and more familiar as he closed the distance between them. Xie Lian brought the two children over, and when he clearly saw the blade, he immediately knelt beside it. "It's not." Isn't this a Ming?" he exclaimed. "What's wrong? Why would a Ming fly at a little... What's happening? What's going on? My baby a Ming would never." Asking a scimitar what's wrong was an extremely odd sight. A few farmers walking past gave Xie Lian odd looks and elbowed each other surreptitiously. Look at that man, he's talking to a blade. Yeah, I see it. Don't bother with him, let's get out of here. But Xie Lian had to ask, because Ming's entire blade body was shaking violently, even the silver-lined eye on the hilt. It shook harder by the minute, like it had contracted a deadly disease. Xie Lian reached out in spite of himself, worried. Did I hurt you just now? That was the end of the chapter. Chapter 48, Fight for Commendation. Ming battles Roye. What? Page 367? The scimitar shook more and more uncontrollably. Xie Lian was at a loss for how to respond, and he gently stroked along the blade's spine. I'm sorry, I didn't see it was you. I won't do it again. After stroking it a few times, Ming's eyes squinted, and the trembling finally stopped. Xie Lian then asked, Where's your master? Suddenly, a voice came from behind. Pay it no mind. Xie Lian looked back and immediately rose to his feet, surprised and delighted. Senlong, what brings you here? What indeed? Behind him was a youth who strolled easily toward Xie Lian with an air of playful arrogance. It was Hua Cheng. He had once more tied his black hair into a crooked ponytail and dressed in a white tunic, his red outer jacket tied around his waist. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing those firm, pale white arms, and the tattoo on one of them. As he walked, the little silver bells on his boots jingled capriciously. He looked very much like a strapping, free-spirited lad next door. He smiled at Xie Lian, a stalk of grass dangling from his lips. Gugu. Xie Lian had originally planned on visiting Hua Cheng to give proper thanks after settling the two children, but here he had showed up first. Lazily, Hua Cheng sauntered to his side and pulled the silver scimitar from the ground with a single hand. He looked it over, then rested it on his shoulder. That was my phone making about 20 different sounds. Gugu is busy here. There's no need to trouble yourself to make the trip when I can come over on my own. You also forgot this. A bamboo hat hung on Hua Cheng's back, and he removed it to hand it over. Xie Lian had forgotten it at the mansion of the wealthy merchant, and he was slightly taken aback. It completely slipped my mind, he hurriedly said. Thanks for going to the trouble. As he spoke, he suddenly remembered what he had told Hua Cheng after a certain incident the night before. I'm looking for my bamboo hat. My bamboo hat is missing. Oh no. Oh no. MXTX really loves a service top. Have you noticed? Are we aware? She's a big fan, and I mean... Whew. This had been nonsense uttered in a state of confusion, but Hua Cheng actually had gone and found his bamboo hat. Xie Lian felt a wave of embarrassment and feared Hua Cheng would tease him for it. Fortunately, Hua Cheng didn't even mention the incident and changed the subject with a smile. Gugu picked up 2 more kids, he commented as he patted Guzi's head, ruffling his hair into a mess. Guzi seemed to be scared of Hua Cheng, and he rushed to hide behind Xie Lian. Xie Lian chided him, Don't worry, this Gugu is a good person. Big words when we don't know a lot about him. I mean, we know a lot about him, but we don't know a lot of... You know what I mean? Nah, I'm a very bad person, Hua Cheng replied. Although that was what he said, he flicked his hand and a tiny silver butterfly flipped out of his sleeve. Fluttering its little wings, it flew errantly toward Guzi. Guzi's inky little eyes bulged as he stared in fixated wonder at the tiny silver butterfly, and he reached out to try to catch it in spite of himself. With that, his suspicion towards Hua Cheng dropped significantly. Hua Cheng nonchalantly glanced at Lang Ying, but this gaze was quite different from the one he turned on Guzi. When Hua Cheng looked at Lang Ying, his eyes were cold and sharp, utterly unfriendly. Lang Ying lowered his head and shrank behind Xie Lian anxiously. If you're gonna come, just come, Xie Lian said, bamboo hat in hand. What are you doing cleaning Pucci Shrine? It was just a bit of tidying, Hua Cheng replied. Don't you think everything feels so much more refreshing now that all the trash is cleared out? Ooh, we love a diss at Chirag, can I just say? Xie Lian remembered the missing Qi and wondered, did Hua Cheng actually throw him out with the garbage? There was a sudden wail from behind Pucci's shrine. No. Hua Cheng, you fucker. Go to hell and get boiled in a pot of frying oil. Murderer. Hua Cheng is committing murder. Gaji cried, Dad! Took him out with the trap. Where he belongs, mind you. Hua Cheng has done nothing wrong in this instance. He dashed over on his little legs, and Xie Lian hastily followed. A small creek ran behind Pucci's shrine. It was where Xie Lian usually did laundry and washed rice. At the moment, it was instead Qi who was being dunked in the water, his body bound tightly by Roye. He desperately tried to keep his head above water and roared for all he was worth. I won't get out. I refuse to get out. I will stay in this body until it dies. I won't surrender. Hua Cheng. My cat's making me paranoid. Hua Cheng spat out the stalk of grass. You take yourself for some kind of hero? Useless trash. I captured him a few days ago on some mountain, Xie Lian explained woefully. He is possessing someone and won't come out. The man is still alive, so if we forcibly rip Qirong's soul out, the flesh won't survive. Honestly, does Sanglong have any idea what we can do? You want ideas on how to make him suffer a fate worse than death? Hua Cheng asked. There's plenty of options. That was obviously a threat. Qirong cussed. You too! Broken pot with a rotten cover to match. Hearts of snakes and scorpions. Claw! As he goes back down underwater. He hadn't finished before he was submerged in the creek again. Whenever Xie Lian saw Qirong, he was filled with both anger and sorrow, remembering how his mother's corpse had dissolved to ash. Nevertheless, that body belonged to another, so it had to be preserved. Thus he fished Qirong from the creek and dragged him to the front door of Pucci's shrine. Qirong hadn't eaten for a full day and night, so his stomach was shriveled with hunger. After Hua Cheng's bullying, he was full of rage, but had no energy. Appearing truly wretched and pathetic, he wolfed down the meat pies Guzi had snuck back from the wealthy merchant's house, leaving not a single crumb. Xie Lian shook his head. He noticed that Qirong's limbs were stiff, probably from some petrification spell cast by Hua Cheng. Roye, return, Xie Lian called. Roye had spent days binding Qirong and was feeling extremely aggrieved for it. With that call, it immediately whooshed over and wrapped itself in loops around Xie Lian's whole body like a white snake. I felt that... Dear God. Phantom sneeze. Oh, that's weird. You ever had that happen to you? That's really weird. Whew. Xie Lian pushed open the door and comforted it as he did so, untying it from his person. All right, I'll give you a bath in a bit. Don't feel bad. Go play over there. Thus, Roye dragged its bandages and listlessly floated to the side. Hua Cheng also casually tossed Aming over, and Aming assumed a dignified pose upon landing. Roye had been moping, facing the wall, but it suddenly discovered a shimmering silver scimitar leaning against that same wall. Oh no. I don't know why it didn't really occur to me what Roye and Aming interacting would even remotely mean or resemble or mean. It very carefully approached. The eye on Aming's hilt twirled and looked over, its gaze calculating. Feng Xin remained somber and unmoved, making no show of acknowledging anything. Xie Lian had spent the past few days studying up on cooking and felt he had perhaps gained considerable insight. His heart was full of confidence. Wanting to show off his skills and properly host Hua Cheng, Xie Lian bade him stay for a meal, to which Hua Cheng, of course, cheerfully agreed. Of course. Xie Lian had bought a bunch of groceries on the way back from town, and he piled them on the altar. Picking up the butcher knife, he chopped and sliced, the pots clinking and clanking. The altar table could be used as a desk, kitchen island, and dining table as well. Cutlery could be set upon it, children could sit all around. One could say it was a table of 100 uses. Hua Cheng leaned against the wall and watched for a bit. Finally, he couldn't watch anymore and spoke. Do you need help? Xie Lian was at the height of his fervor and dismissed him. No need, Royer's help is plenty. To demonstrate, he threw out a few bundles of firewood that hadn't yet been chopped. Like an attacking viper, the white silk bandage whipped the logs, and chunks of wood originally thick as thighs were instantly chopped into thin sticks of kindling. Having shown off its skills, Royer arched into an odd, exaggerated form in front of Aming and Fengshin, like it was demonstrating its strength and beauty. Said demonstration didn't last long. Xie Lian moved again to place a plate on the ground before tossing over a big cabbage. Royer was just about to strike when suddenly Aming's eye flashed. No, stop it. It's too fucking cute. It flew off the ground and whirled out shimmers of silver light. Oh my god, there's art. Leaves of cabbage filled the air and they landed on the plate, thinly and cleanly chopped. Xie Lian squatted to pick up the plate and praised Aming aloud when he saw the results. Amazing! You cut better than Royer. I mean, sword. Bandages, basically. Cloth, you know. Royer instantly pressed itself against the wall, looking like someone backing away with nowhere left to run. Aming spun its eye wildly and appeared fully smug, as if it were floating on cloud 9. Fengshin continued to remain unmoved. Xie Lian hadn't noticed the little battle between the spiritual weapons, so focused was he on dropping all sorts of different vegetables and seasonings into the pot. However, he still had the mind to ask, by the way, Senlong, how long are you staying this time? Hua Cheng had been observing Xie Lian the entire time. He looked like he wanted to advise him in some way at first, but in the end he smiled and said nothing of the sort. Depends. If nothing's going on in Ghost City, I'll stick around to play for a few days. I hope Gaga won't mind me hanging around. Why would I? Xie Lian hastily assured him, as long as you don't mind my place being a bit cramped. Xie Lian chattered animatedly, telling Hua Cheng all about how Lan Cheng threw around blame and caused trouble the moment she set foot in the Palace of Divine Might. Of course, he refrained from mentioning how he himself had been accused, as well as the whole business with dripping blood on Yanzhen. Then again, he remembered Junwu saying Hua Cheng had planted a spy in the heavenly realm, so maybe Hua Cheng already knew everything that had transpired. Fortunately, Hua Cheng only looked contemplative and made no show of whether or not he already knew. Xie Lian asked idly, Senlong, who do you think the father of the fetus spirit is? Before we get to that answer, look at this goddamn adorable art. Oh my god, the two best spiritual weapons in the world. They're having a cute little battle. No, stop it. Hua Cheng looked up and smiled faintly. Hard to say. Maybe that golden belt really was just something she picked up off the ground. A vague response like that wasn't remotely Hua Cheng's usual style, and it rather puzzled Xie Lian. But soon the bubbling pot stole his focus. After 2 incense time, he opened the cover to the pot. Usually, all Qirong ate were offerings that the villagers had made to Xie Lian. It was never anything more than steamed buns and pickles, noodles and eggs, wild fruits and such other things. But at least it was food fit for humans. The moment the pot cover opened and the smell of its contents wafted outside Pucci's shrine, Qirong started screaming curses. God fucking Xie Lian! Black-hearted snow lotus! You might as well just stab me dead right now. So acting good by fishing me out was all to make me suffer this torture. I've seen through you! Before opening the pot cover, Xie Lian had been full of confidence. Now he doubted himself again. He had tried his best and exerted so much effort, but it had still resulted in this entree. Hua Cheng was watching. Whatever should he do? Was he really going to make Hua Cheng eat something like this? It's the concern. Listening to Qirong scream bloody murder, Xie Lian became even more demoralized. Seeing that Hua Cheng had crossed his arms and was about to go outside, Xie Lian raised a hand to stop him. Never mind him, Xie Lian sighed and portioned out a bowl of the substance that had formed within the pot. Don't eat anything from this pot, just wait for me for a second. Then he went outside. He ushered Guji and Lang Ying to go get a bucket of water, sending them away from the premises. Xie Lian squatted down with the bowl, looking pleasant and airy. Little cousin, it's time to eat. Qirong was shocked and terrified in equal measure. What are you doing? What are you planning? Xie Lian, I'm warning you, a human life is at stake here. You better think this through. Whoever the hell can stomach that shit will break free from the bondage of the three realms, flee the wheel of Dharma. No one. Qirong trailed off when he saw Hua Cheng ladle himself a full bowl, then sit next to the altar table inside the shrine and take a bite, his face unchanging and steady as the mountains. Well, given what they eat in Ghost City, I can only imagine what a Supreme would be used to eating. His face unchanging and steady as the mountains. Qirong was shaken to the core. A thought he'd never had before flashed through his mind, as expected of a Supreme. Xie Lian pushed the bowl against Qirong's face as he said calmly, "It's fine if you don't want to eat it, as long as you come out, that is." That was never going to happen. Qirong clamped his teeth shut, but Xie Lian squeezed his cheeks and easily forced open his mouth, dumping the contents of the bowl straight down his throat. A sharp scream shot to the skies above Pucci's shrine. The bowl in Xie Lian's hand sat empty. Qirong lay sprawled on the ground, wearing a twisted, scrunched-up expression. Even his voice was hoarse, like an old man wasting away. "I hate..." Seeing as Qirong still refused to exit the body, even with a full bowl of Xie Lian's cooking forced down his throat, Xie Lian didn't know whether to be reassured or anguished. He really wanted to force Qirong out as soon as possible, but since he hadn't succeeded, it almost seemed to prove that this dish he had cooked with all his heart wasn't so bad after all. Perhaps it was even worth being proud of. Turning around, Xie Lian saw that the bowl in Hua Cheng's hand was almost empty. He was eating leisurely, looking at Xie Lian, as he did. Xie Lian's eyes lit up and he rose to his feet. "Senlong, are you finished?" He thought he had botched the meal at first and been too embarrassed to offer it to Hua Cheng, who knew Hua Cheng would take the initiative to help himself. Hua Cheng chuckled. "Yeah." Xie Lian prodded very carefully for his opinion. "What did you think?" Hua Cheng slurped up the remaining broth and smiled. "Not bad. The taste is a bit strong. Try making it a little milder next time." Xie Lian sighed a breath of relief and nodded. "All right, I'll remember that. Thanks for your feedback." Qirong groaned. They are just terrifyingly homosexual and domestic. Whew, that was the end of the chapter. We are now on page 377. Chapter 49. Stew of the Good Crown Prince. To welcome unexpected guests. Xie Lian had planned to show off his culinary skills, but after this evening's events his confidence had risen and plunged in equal measure. Hua Cheng suggested he make dinner instead, but how could Xie Lian have the face to ask him to cook after Hua Cheng had already fixed his door and cleaned his shrine? Who in their right mind would treat their guest this way? And furthermore, who did he take an esteemed supreme ghost king for? Fortunately, he brought plenty of supplies back from town. While a large portion had gone into Xie Lian's pot, some buns and pies still remained, as well as fruits and vegetables, so they munched on what they had. But after those were eaten, what then? The next day, the problem was solved on its own. Bright and early in the morning, the door of Pucci's shrine rattled with the knockings of a gaggle of village girls who had come offering several large pots of congee and a roasted chicken. The village girls were shy and nervous, so who they'd really come to see was quite obvious. Xie Lian couldn't help but sigh in awe as he thought, beauty really can fill a stomach. The roasted chicken was divided between the two children. Xie Lian only had some congee, while Hua Cheng didn't touch a thing. "Gaga is quite popular around here," Hua Cheng commented with a smile. "Don't tease me, Senlong," Xie Lian laughed. They were obviously drunk, but not on wine. After Qirong took the contents of that bowl down his throat yesterday, he suffered and struggled outside the shrine the entire night, wailing nonstop and yelling things along the lines of, "I'd rather be captured by Leng Chanshu and butchered into a million pieces than be stuck here and fed your poison." Cousin Crown Prince, I was wrong. Please, I beg you, give me the antidote. As the night went on, it seems that he eventually started hallucinating and became delusional. Little Guzi was horrified as he listened. By early morning, Chirong was shriveled and drained, his face completely ashen. Only after he slurped a bit of kanji from Guzi's cupped palm did he finally regain some strength. Popular my ass, who the hell would come for him? He croaked with a broken voice. Look at that shabby appearance, and don't you be so full of yourself, Hua Cheng, you fucker. At most, you could only attract bumpkin chicks from backwater towns like these. They only came simpering along because you're dressed so extravagantly. If you dressed the part of a beggar, I doubt they'd spare you a glance. Xie Lian thought that wasn't right at all. Even if Hua Cheng dressed like a pauper, he would surely collect a mountain of gold should he go begging. Still, he said nothing and started leisurely doing chores. After a while, another wave of smells wafted outside, and Chirong roared out curses anew. What are you doing now? What the hell? It's that pot of love for all seasons stew, Xie Lian replied warmly. I'm heating it up. Hua Cheng applauded quietly at this. What a good name. Chirong screeched, You gave that fucking shit a name? Stop! The mere smell of the reheating brew made Chirong recall memories most terrifying, so there wasn't really a need to feed him. Chirong didn't dare speak another word. Once the meal was finished, Lang Ying silently collected the cutlery, seeming like he intended to do the dishes. Let it be, Xie Lian chided him. Just go play. I can take care of this. Maybe he wasn't allowed to cook, but he could still do the dishes. Hua Cheng watched Lang Ying take Guzi outside. Let me do that for you, Hua Cheng said. Xie Lian declined the offer. There's even less reason for you to trouble yourself. Just sit. As he spoke, they heard a ruckus outside. Chirong had gotten bored with nothing to do after filling his stomach, and he'd started catcalling. Hey, chickie, what are you doing checking me out? Chirong cooed greasily. Did I make your tender little heart quiver? He'd just been griping about how he didn't care for country girls, only to turn around and start flirting, and so tastelessly, too. Xie Lian shook his head, thinking it would be best to drag Chirong inside after all, lest he scare people while tied up out there. Before he even opened the door, he heard odd comments from the villagers. Whoa, what legendary beauties! Why would such beautiful girls come to our village? I've never seen such pretty ladies, not in my whole life, and there's 2 of them. Soon after, there was the sound of knocking, and it surprisingly came upon the door of Pucci's shrine. Xie Lian was puzzled. Legendary beauties? 2 of them. Why would 2 legendary beauties come knocking on my door? Xie Lian then realized. Odd, could it be? Did that wealthy merchant get some new wives and bring them to show their gratitude? Thinking that this could very well be the case, Xie Lian quickly grabbed for the Please Donate to Help with Renovations of the Shrine sign, ready to set it outside. But he then heard one of the women speak in a frosty tone. What's this thing at the door? What an eyesore. Immediately, the puzzled voice of another woman followed. Maybe it's for guarding the door? No way. No one would ever have a reason to sink so low, to use such a vulgar spiritual beast. Although they were women's voices, Xie Lian had heard them before. It was Windmaster Qingxuan and Earthmaster Yi. At first he wanted to open the door. Then he whipped his head around to look at Hua Cheng, who was languidly cleaning up the altar table behind him. Xie Lian stopped his hands, cautiously peeking out the door's crack instead. Outside the door stood 2 tall, slender women. One was a white-robed Taoist priestess with a whisk in hand, her lips rosy, her eyes bright, her form sensually graceful. The other was a woman clad in black, her skin snow-white and her face beautifully sharp. She wore an upset expression as she glowered into the distance, her hands folded behind her back. The white-robed Taoist priestess had a face full of smiles, cupping her hands to salute her thanks to all around. Thanks everyone, thank you. No need to compliment us so much, no need to make such a scene. It gets me all flustered when you fuss over me. That's enough now, thank you. Xie Lian had no words. A large, tightly packed crowd of beauty-watching villagers was outside, and once they were done looking at the beauties, they started pointing and jeering at Chirong, to the latter's great displeasure. What are you all looking at? He screamed maniacally. So what if this ancestor likes lying on the ground? Fuck off, there's nothing to see here. When the villagers saw how bizarrely the man behaved, how fiendish he looked with that sickly green face, they dispersed in a fright. Shi Qingxuan looked Qirong over. This Gringongji, pray tell, is His Highness the Crown Prince inside the shrine. Hearing her address Xie Lian as His Highness the Crown Prince, Qirong immediately lost interest in the two beautiful women before him. He clicked his tongue. So you're some goddamn officials from the upper court, as if this ancestor is a dog guarding his door. Listen here, He hadn't finished his introduction before Mingyi glumly approached. There was a wail, followed by sounds of smacking. From Xie Lian's position, he couldn't discern exactly what Mingyi was doing, and could only see Shi Qingxuan sweep her whisk as she chided her companion. Mingxiang, it's not good to use violence. What's there to be afraid of? Mingyi asked coolly. Didn't he say he's not a domesticated spiritual beast? To prevent Qirong from getting beaten to death, Xie Lian had no choice but to open the door. He raised his hands to stop Mingyi. My lord, have mercy, don't hit him, he's a person. When Xie Lian opened the door, Mingyi flipped away her black hem and removed her boot from Qirong's back. Shi Qingxuan cupped her hands in courtesy. Your Highness, I've come a few days early. What's with this person? He's so full of ghost chi that it's impossible to hide. Do you take us for blind? Shi Qingxuan changed the subject. Anyway, let's talk inside. I have something really important I need your help with. She made her way around Qirong's prone body as she spoke and was about to cross over the threshold. But Hua Cheng was still inside. How could Xie Lian possibly let them in? Wait, he cried hastily. However, it was too late. Pucci Shrine was only so big, and it had no places to hide. Shi Qingxuan and Mingyi immediately saw that behind Xie Lian there stood a supreme ghost king who was in the middle of doing dishes. 4 pairs of eyes met. Sparks flew. Hua Cheng smiled a smile that showed his teeth. The smile was ominous, and his eyes held no trace of mirth. In an instant, Mingyi's pupils shrank, and she backed a meter away. Exceedingly alarmed, Shi Qingxuan flung out her Windmaster fan to strike an attacking stance. Crimson Rain sought flower! Outside the door, the ashen-faced Qirong roared with rage. And I'm the night touring Green Lantern! How come none of you recognized me when kicking the shit out of me, but you knew it was him with just one look? Mingyi had infiltrated Ghost City and spent many years as a spy under Hua Cheng. Only recently had she been discovered and captured, and subsequently locked in a labyrinthine dungeon and beaten to a pulp. Now the two enemies faced each other once more, their eyes bloodshot. Tiny little Pucci's shrine was filled with the scent of venom inside and out. Hua Cheng lightly tossed the rag in his hand and smirked. Lord Earthmaster looks lively. And the Lord Ghost King looks leisurely as always, Mingyi replied coldly. After exchanging these false perfunctory greetings, the next words that came out of Hua Cheng's mouth were even colder, and his expression turned positively glacial. Leave, he warned. I don't care what important business you have. Do not come anywhere near here again. Although Mingyi feared Hua Cheng, she refused to back down without a fight. She responded, her tone gravely serious. Coming here was not my will. The venom was turning explosive, and Xie Lian grew nervous next to them. What? Lord Windmaster, what should we do? Shi Qingxuan knocked her fan on her head a few times. I didn't expect Crimson Rain sought flower to be here, she sighed. Didn't you guys just meet up recently? How come you're palling around again so soon? Anyway, it'd be great if this could be solved without throwing fists. Violence is bad. If they start fighting, we'll have to hold them back. Xie Lian replied, I agree, mostly. Qirong had been listening intently, and he was hoping the pair would start brawling. When he heard this, he suddenly spoke up. Oh, so you're that tramp Windmaster. Both Xie Lian and Shi Qingxuan turned to look at him. That was exactly how Qirong had referred to Shi Qingxuan when he was lounging in his cave, but he dared address her like that even in front of the lady herself. Xie Lian couldn't decide whether it stemmed from an excess of bravery or a deficit of intelligence. Shi Qingxuan had always been raised in dignified grace, so this was probably the first time she'd ever heard such an insult. She blinked, looking confused, then turned to Xie Lian. Your Highness, please wait. Then she exited the shrine and closed the door. Out there was a shriek from Qirong and another bout of smacking noises. A moment later, Shi Qingxuan opened the door to come back in. He had returned to his male form. All right, where were we? I'm feeling kind of hungry, so how about we all sit down and eat something, he declared. There's nothing that can't be negotiated and nothing that can't be solved at the dinner table. Xie Lian didn't want anyone to start fighting inside Pucci's shrine, but Hua Cheng seemed extremely angry over the matter of Ming Yi's infiltration. Without knowing the inside story, it seemed rather impossible to have them sit down and share a peaceful meal. However, Hua Cheng actually didn't seem to object to the idea. After a long moment, the frost in his expression cleared, and he turned to continue doing dishes. Once he finished, he walked to the pot and ladled a full bowl of that love-for-all-seasons stew. As he withdrew and thereby put a stop to the imminent battle, the rest sighed a breath of relief. The next step was to change the subject and liven the mood. So, Shi Qingxuan asked, Your Highness, what's in that pot? It seems to still be hot. Oh, I made that, Xie Lian said. The pot had been stewing for a long time. The flavors were completely soaked in, and most of the smell had dissipated. Although the color was questionable, the shapes had all but melted away, and it looked so much better than it had the night before. Shi Qingxuan vibrated with excitement when he heard this reply. Really? I've never eaten anything prepared by the hands of a heavenly official. Come, let's have a taste. He grabbed some spoons and filled 2 bowls. Xie Lian wanted to stop him, to be honest, but Hua Cheng had been so consistently encouraging, burying seeds of confidence within him. Also, earlier that morning, as he heated the stew, he'd changed the preparation according to Hua Cheng's suggestions. A thought surfaced in his mind. Perhaps I saved it. After some hesitation, he decided not to say anything. He watched with secret anticipation as Shi Qingxuan passed one of the bowls to Ming Yi. Come, Mingxiang, this one's yours. Ming Yi took a look at the contents of the bowl, then turned her face away, looking wholly unwilling. It was a little rude. Shi Qingxuan was outraged and unrelentingly forced the bowl in her face. Eat! Didn't you say you were hungry on the road earlier? Hua Cheng lazily raised a spoonful and blew on it. He brought it to his lips, then swallowed and smiled at Xie Lian. It's definitely milder today. The flavor's just right. Xie Lian smiled too. Really? I added more water today. God, guys, domestic. Hua Cheng took another bite and beamed. Gaga did his best. Oh my God, get a room. What the hell? You are in front of people. A little decorum, just a little. Hua Cheng behaved as though he were tasting some delicious delicacy, and he was incredibly convincing to behold. A moment later, Ming Yi took the bowl after all. Shi Qingxuan smiled. That's better. The pair spooned mouthfuls of the stew at the same time and swallowed them down. That's the end of the chapter, actually. Technically. We're now on page 387, which is chapter 50. Venerable of Empty Words, mourning at the celebration. Mourning is in grief. Huh. How is it? Xie Lian asked. Thud. Ming Yi collapsed onto the altar table face down as if she'd lost consciousness. Next to her, 2 lines of silent tears streamed down Shi Qingxuan's face. Xie Lian hesitantly pressed them. My lords, how is it exactly? Can you collect your thoughts and give me some constructive criticism using your words? Shi Qingxuan snapped out of it. He wiped away his tears, then clutched Xie Lian's hands. Squeezing them with force, he said, nigh unintelligibly, Your Highness. Xie Lian reversed the hold and clutched Shi Qingxuan's hands back. What? Shi Qingxuan was lisping and couldn't speak. A moment later, he let out a sob and pushed Ming Yi. Mingxiang, what's wrong? Get a hold of yourself. Wake up. Ming Yi lay unmoving on the table. Shi Qingxuan could never stand anyone ignoring him, so one thing led to another until he was strangling Ming Yi, shaking her violently. Xie Lian couldn't watch this anymore, and he gently pointed out, Lord Windmaster, why don't you put down the broom and we can talk things out? Shi Qingxuan was busy strangling that broom, and he whipped his head around to shout, Your Highness, what did you say? I can't hear you. Feeling a little helpless, Xie Lian yelled into his ear, Lord Windmaster, the thing in your hands is not Lord Earthmaster. Lord Earthmaster is here. Here. Just then, Ming Yi sat bolt upright. He returned to his male form in a flash. His face was as dark as iron, and his words bore down on Xie Lian oppressively. My heart has been overtaken by inner demons. Please exorcise them for me. A spoonful of stew could cause a demon infestation of the heart? Xie Lian was shocked to the core. He mumbled, that can't be possible. Shi Qingxuan pointed at Ming Yi, his eyes round and bulging. Hold it! You! What manner of evil are you to dare flaunt your petty tricks before this Windmaster? Where's Ming Xiang? Quick, I'll shield you. Let's take it down together. Broom in one hand, Xie Qingxuan flung out the Wingmaster, fan in the other. If he attacked with that fan, then the entire roof would be blown away for sure. Xie Lian hastily rushed over to hold him down. Don't! My lords, please, will you both snap out of it? Qirong slammed his fists on the ground outside as he shrieked with laughter. Y'all deserved it! Damn officials, go die and ascend! This is fucking great. I feel so vindicated. The two officials inside fell over themselves and groaned nonstop. Hua Cheng leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Xie Lian looked at him, then at the Windmaster and Earthmaster, who were curled up into balls on the ground and clutching their heads. Is it maybe because I didn't add enough water after all? He murmured. Why are their reactions stronger than Qirong's? Hua Cheng arched his eyebrows. I think it's fine. It's probably a problem with their taste buds. It happens. Xie Lian had never thought much about the difference between Qirong's usual diet and that of heavenly officials, but comparing the two now made clear an obvious disparity in taste. It was only logical that a heavenly official's shock in this case would be greater, which meant their reactions were naturally far stronger. Of course, it never crossed Xie Lian's mind that anything could have been added to the pot after it passed through Hua Cheng's hands. Feeling both depressed and guilty, Xie Lian fed Shi Qingxuan and Ming Yi 7 or 8 bowls of water apiece before they slowly came around. Although their complexions were sickly green like Qirong's, and their eyes dead, at least they were conscious, and their speech returned. The only lingering problems were the unstoppable tears streaming down Shi Qingxuan's face, and that when he spoke, he occasionally accidentally bit his tongue. Other than that, there weren't any real issues. After all that ruckus, 2 hours later, the four finally sat down around the altar table properly. Ming Yi still had his face down on the altar, still like a corpse. Xie Lian schooled his expression and inquired solemnly, Lord Windmaster, you said there was something important you wanted my help with. What is it exactly? Shi Qingxuan, looking haggard, flung a soundproofing spell on the door to ensure that no one outside could hear a word of their discussion. It's like this, he croaked with a hoarse voice. Your Highness, you've been living in the bustling world of mortals, cultivating within their realm for 800 years. You've walked and seen much, so you must have encountered a vast number of nefarious beings, right? Present company notwithstanding. Xie Lian crossed his arms. I've met some. Then I want to ask, have you ever encountered a venerable of empty words? Xie Lian was taken aback. A venerable of empty words? The creature that mourns at feasts? That's right, Shi Qingxuan's voice had dropped to a hush. Xie Lian felt a hair-raising, cold breeze blow up his spine, swishing his locks. At the same time, someone seemed to be next to his ear, giggling and humming an exceedingly creepy tune. Little Pucci Shrine was always awash in the warmth of sunlight peeking through its windows and cracks, but even this had dimmed, as if the entirety had been enveloped by a great shadow. Xie Lian's limbs and fingers grew cold as iron. Xie Lian clutched his robes tight in spite of himself and felt the need to voice his concern. I have to ask, who's laughing? Who's singing? Who's blowing cold air up my back? Who made the shrine this dark? Shi Qingxuan wiped away tears. Oh, that's all me. It's just a little spell, don't mind it, just setting the mood. The other three at the altar table were speechless. Moments later, Xie Lian put his hand to his forehead in exasperation. Lord Windmaster, how about we stop with the breeze? None of us are wearing layers in this weather. Besides, the mood before was perfectly fine until the cold air and music ruined it. Huh, really? Shi Qingxuan asked. With a wave of his hand, the cold air blowing up everyone's backs dispersed. But I think it'll be good if the shrine remains this dark. Let me light a candle. The ambiance will be even better. As he spoke, he really did take out a candle and light it. The flickering candlelight illuminated 2 snow-white complexions and 2 pale greenish faces. The mood improved considerably. The haunting atmosphere was exceptional. Perhaps even Qirong, still tied up outside, would squawk and scream in fright. The other 3 were no longer inclined to make further commentary. Hua Cheng leaned back and Ming Yi remained like a stiff corpse. Let's continue. Where were we? Xie Lian rubbed his forehead. The venerable of empty words? Why didn't you just say jinx monster? It took me a moment to realize what you were talking about when you called it that. Your Highness, what guts you have, Shi Qingxuan exclaimed in shock. It's not very considerate to refer to it as such, is it? The venerable of empty words had been bequeathed a respectful title, but people only addressed it as venerable for show. If its given name were too unseemly, people feared that the creature would overhear and retaliate. The truth was, everyone wished they could curse it as the foul-mouthed immortal or the jinx monster. The worse the moniker, the better, because it really was abominable in the extreme. That's right, normal nefarious creatures were frightening, but this one was abominable. If someone was happy in their moment of joy, it would appear to dump a bucket of cold water over their head. A killjoy in the most literal of terms. Consider for a moment the following scenario. This creature appears at the reception for a pair of newlyweds to gobble up the feast and suddenly declare, it won't be long before the 2 of you divorce. Or as another example, this creature appears just as the master of a household receives a promotion in office and cries out in amidst all the congratulations, in just a few years you'll be cuffed and sent to jail. If it latched itself onto someone, it would become like their shadow, endlessly predicting future misery whenever a joyous occasion should occur. Truly abominable, especially for the superstitious sort who feared ominous signs. If they ran into the thing, they'd surely die from distress alone. No one wanted to be haunted by a monster like this, but if one were unfortunate enough to cross paths with it, one could only accept their fate. After all, the means by which it selected its prey was a mystery. It seemed Shi Qingxuan was quite wary of the creature, but Xie Lian didn't think the beastly thing was such a big deal. Don't worry, it's nothing to be scared of. Such a creature was significantly more likely to be scared of Xie Lian, to be exact. Shi Qingxuan perked up. So, your Highness has met one. Is there any way to exterminate it completely? Thinking it over for a moment, Xie Lian replied, Over the years, I bumped into 2, but after our encounters, they never showed themselves again. I don't know for sure whether they were completely exterminated, but in my experience, it's not that difficult to deal with them. Art. Shi Qingxuan was overjoyed. 2? You managed to deal with 2? I've really come to the right person. So what happened? Thus Xie Lian began his tales. The first one went like this. Many years ago, Xie Lian passed through a small town. There, a wealthy merchant was sending his daughter to the imperial capital to study, and because of his daughter's outstanding skill, he made a big show of publicly commending her. It was a joyous occasion, but who could have predicted that joy would brew tragedy? At the send-off feast, a voice bellowed, Your daughter's carriage will overturn on the road, and she will crash down into the valley and die. A wealthy merchant, the wealthy merchant, jumped to his feet in rage, set on catching the one who would say such a thing. But that person ducked under the table immediately and disappeared into thin air. Afterward, everyone was fearful. Fortunately, Xie Lian went to the merchant's household that day to collect junk. He managed to get some leftovers from the feast and was about to head back when he heard what had happened. He immediately knew what the creature was and told the wealthy merchant not to worry. He then asked the wealthy merchant to hire 20-some guards, and with Xie Lian himself included, they carefully and safely escorted the little lady to the capital. He guarded the girl for a while, biding his time. A month later, the little lady won first place in a beauty contest, and an opportunity arrived. That night, a feast was held at a restaurant in the capital to celebrate the little lady, a phrase I apparently cannot say. Sure enough, again, a voice from the crowd bellowed, "You will be—" The moment Xie Lian heard its voice, he immediately seized the creature from the crowd, choking it by the neck to stop it from uttering even a single word. Then he used a talisman to seal its body, and following this, he beat it to a bloody pulp. Next, he ordered a carriage and took it to the valleys to run wildly astray. At a winding corner of a mountain pass, the reins snapped, and the carriage crashed down the cliff, fulfilling its own curse. "That's it?" the other three asked. "That's it," Xie Lian said. "To deal with the jinx." "All right, the venerable of empty words. There are 3 ways to handle it. The first is not to let it open its mouth. Cut it off before it can speak. This works in the moment, but not in perpetuity, so you need to remain vigilant at all times. Second, if it should speak, don't let the subject of its curse hear. Anyone would be frightened to hear someone cursing them at the height of their joy, and that creature feeds on fear. It revels in it. The more frightened you are, the happier it becomes. If you should lose yourself to terror and ruin your own affairs in accordance with its words, its powers increase significantly. But unless you're deaf, you'll definitely hear it speak sooner or later. To be honest, not even the deaf can escape. Some have cut off their own ears in an attempt to do so, but in the end, it was still useless. However, if you pay no mind to however it tries to curse you or rain on your parade, then it can't do anything to you. So the most effective method is the third. Surround yourself with happy occasions and ignore it completely. Let it choose to speak or remain silent, but forget everything it says. Make yourself stronger and continue down your path according to your own will and not in accordance with the tragedy it predicted for you. If it can draw no despair from you, it will eventually leave on its own with its tail between its legs. Of course, it could still very well be lying low, waiting for its next chance to strike." Did MXTX just create a monster metaphor for anxiety? Maybe it's just me, who has anxiety, who might be like reading into nothing, but boy, if that doesn't sound like anxiety and the cure for it, really, which is much easier said than done. But am I crazy? I mean, technically I am, but you know about this. Although the third method was the most effective, it was also the most difficult to accomplish. After all, who in the world could truly build such a heart of stone and feel not a single ripple of fear? The more Shi Qingxuan listened, the harder his brow furrowed. "Then what about the second time? Did you take care of it the same way then?" "The second time might not be useful as a reference," Xie Lian explained. "It was a unique situation, after all." "How is it unique?" "The individual it latched onto was me," replied Xie Lian. Many years ago, there was a small scene break. Many years ago, Xie Lian himself encountered a venerable of empty words. See, even just the name of it, venerable of empty words, that's motherfucking anxiety. This is an anxiety monster. It's gotta be. At the time, he had just finished constructing a small hut by his own handiwork. He was standing there, admiring his new abode, when suddenly a tiny voice came from one of the corners. "This dwelling of yours will collapse in 2 months. "So what did you do?" Shi Qingxuan asked. "Nothing," Xie Lian replied. "I said, 2 months? If it's still standing in 7 days, then it'll be a real miracle." Hua Cheng's lips curved slightly, but that smile quickly faded. The venerable of empty words hid in the shadows, waiting to feed on Xie Lian's fear, frustration, insecurity, and other such negative emotions. However, its jaws gnawed on nothing but empty air. Even when Xie Lian finished cleaning and fell asleep in his new house, it still hadn't managed to suck anything out of him. Although Xie Lian never saw its form, he could sense that it was probably quite angry. Not even a few days later, lightning struck and the entire hut was scorched. The venerable of empty words was most pleased, probably thinking scorched wasn't any different from collapsed. The curse had technically been fulfilled. Xie Lian surely had to be afraid now. Yet this was not so, and still it couldn't manage to absorb anything from him to fill its stomach. Refusing to give in, it followed Xie Lian and waited for the next joyous occasion to arise. But who could have known that it would wait for over half a year? In that half a year, Xie Lian experienced not a single joyous occasion. Anyone else would have given up. However, creatures known as venerables of empty words possessed a unique trait, and that was obstinance. They were relentless in their pursuit of their chosen prey, and so it starved pathetically for that last half year. Finally, an opportunity came to pass. One day, Xie Lian managed to collect a large bundle of junk and made a small fortune. The venerable of empty words was overjoyed. Having been thwarted for so long, it passionately launched into a long and rambling string of curses. After Xie Lian struck it rich, he would waste his fortune on gambling and drink, only to fall sick and be trailed by an endless string of debt, and so on. Xie Lian counted his money and listened with indulgent amusement. Afterward, he washed up as he'd always done and went to bed. The venerable of empty words drank nothing. That night, Xie Lian's pile of junk caught fire. After the fire was put out, Xie Lian turned to the venerable of empty words and sighed, his face black with ash. What a shame! It's all burnt! Not a single scrap left. I didn't even get the chance to experience that lifetime of riches, or any of those other drunken dreams you spoke of. I think the things you say are quite interesting. How about you tell me more? Similar incidents occurred again and again, over and over. Toward the end of their time together, Xie Lian would prompt the venerable of empty words for its input before it even spoke. Do you have anything to say? Do you want to say something? Finally, the venerable of empty words couldn't take it anymore and fled. To venerables of empty words, a god of misfortune like Xie Lian was an extremely unfavorable target. Either he experienced no happy occasions, and they waited fruitlessly for years, or he had already grown accustomed to all the bad luck and suffered neither fear nor anxiety. His luck was so bad it defied the imagination of the venerable of empty words, so Xie Lian thought nothing of its curses, and in fact treated them as well wishes or daydreams. In any case, after that, Xie Lian never ran into any venerables of empty words. He suspected perhaps that his venerable of empty words fled back to its own kind and griped to them about Xie Lian's general vileness. Shi Qingxuan listened up to that point and couldn't manage to hold it in. He snorted a laugh. Is it very funny? Hua Cheng asked quietly. Oh, that's why Hua Cheng... Shi Qingxuan knew it was inappropriate and instantly schooled his expression. Sorry, Your Highness, he apologized solemnly. Xie Lian smiled. Don't worry, I think it's pretty amusing too. He concluded, the venerable of empty words draws power from fear in people's hearts. With this power, it manipulates its victims to realize its predictions and then make new ones. The cycle continues until the person is thoroughly broken and their mind is lost to despair. This is honest to God, the mental illness beast. Like, seriously. There's no other. It manipulates its victims to realize its predictions, self-fulfilling prophecies. Yeah, brought about by fear and anxiety, which is just another word for fear. Like, what? The more unsteady one's heart, the more disadvantageous their position. The more one has, the more one fears loss. Jesus Christ. After a pause, he suggested, did one of Lord Windmaster's devotees request his help after receiving such a curse? You're the god of wind, so something like this isn't within your jurisdiction. If you received such a prayer, You can pass it on to a martial god. It wasn't a devotee who ran into it, Shi Qingxuan replied. It was me. Now Xie Lian was even more amazed. You, venerables of empty words, usually don't dare target heavenly officials. Even if they tried, an esteemed heavenly official such as yourself need not fear them. Shi Qingxuan sighed. If I'd run into it after my ascension, then of course there would be nothing to worry about, but it's a long story. Many hundreds of years ago, when the wind and water masters were still mortal, they were born and raised in an affluent, prosperous merchant household. Shi Qingxuan was the second son, and when he was born, the entire family rejoiced. They gave him the baby name Xuan. For the sake of building up good luck for the new child, they widely distributed kanji and such fare to the hungry and performed acts of compassion. At the time, there was a fortune teller who, as he ate the kanji, saw the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes. He asked for the details of his birth, then said, "Since I've taken a meal from your household, I will tell you this. That son of yours might have a good life, but it's difficult to explain the whole story. If you want to keep him safe, know that he must be kept low profile. Don't raise him to be the ostentatious type. Don't give him the chance to shine, and build up an inheritance for him in subtle silence. This will ensure he lives a life of peace." Pardon me, and build up an inheritance for him in subtle silence. Be sure to never host any celebratory feasts in his name, or you will invite something bad along with them. This guy was his own venerable of empty words. Now, those were terribly unpleasant words, and very much like something a venerable of empty words would say. Thank you. The Shi family was a merchant household, and all the qualities the fortune teller described were especially valuable to them. The fortune teller was shooed away on the spot with a frown, and his words were naturally dismissed. A few days later, a feast was held in Shi Qingxuan's honor. The lanterns shone and the banners flew. Drums thundered and gongs sounded. At the feast, the guests hollered their congratulations, singing songs of praise to the second young master of the Shi family, wrapped in swaddling clothes. Then a sing-song voice suddenly rang out from the floor. "Wretched beginning, wretched end." That voice came from below the ground, but it overtook the voices of everyone present. The crowd was dumbfounded with shock. The feast ended with apprehension thick in the air. That very night, baby Shi Qingxuan burned with fever, crying and dry-heaving non-stop. The fever wouldn't break no matter what was done, and the entire family was terrified out of their wits. The Shi family remembered that strange fortune-teller who they had kicked out not long ago, and they hastily searched all over to invite him back. "I told you to keep a low profile, but you didn't listen," the fortune-teller scolded them. "Now that the child has caught the eye of the Reverend, his life will be filled with endless peril." Reverend was capitalized. "This bout of fever is nothing, and it will subside on its own. But this, it's nothing more than a welcoming gift." Of course he was talking about a venerable of empty words, but this wasn't a typical venerable of empty words that could be chased away so easily. It was most ancient indeed, and strong in cultivation. How strong? Even without joyous occasions, it could still mourn. This was how it came to be called the Reverend of Empty Words. Okay, so, still talking about anxiety, kind of starting to talk about depression from what it sounds like. The sale of a single expensive item can feed a business that is otherwise quiet for years. And the Reverend was the very embodiment of this concept. Its eyes were viciously sharp, and it had a taste for prey of legendary character and earth-shaking destiny. Some managed to win against it, but their entire lives were devoted to the fight, and their constant struggles provided it with rich meals. Some were utterly destroyed and became its fuel. Having hoarded power for close to 1,000 years, its foundation was deep and solid. This some Babadook shit. It had finally awoken after a century's rest and had decided it was time to stretch its legs. And when it next opened its mouth to feed, it was eager to take a large bite. Shi Qingxuan had just been born and was incidentally exactly to its taste. Thus he was reserved by the Reverend. Although the tiny baby couldn't understand its predictions even if he heard them, there would come a day when he could comprehend, just as there would come a day he knew fear. Once this fear was planted during the boy's childhood, it would burrow deep and become impossible to uproot. Fortunately, spirits and monsters like these didn't have much in the way of brains, and their way of thinking was bizarre. The fortune-teller plotted out a way to trick it, and the Shi family put the plot into action. They sent Shi Qingxuan away and pretended he'd been given to another family, then dressed their son to look like a female baby before bringing him back. The family then claimed that the female babe was an adopted daughter and raised the little young master as a little young mistress instead. Huh. As long as the Reverend of Empty Words could not find the male baby it had reserved, it surely wouldn't be able to remember who it had picked after some time had passed. It was with this plot that Shi Qingxuan matured to 10 years of age in peace. Over those 10 years, the once wealthy merchant household gradually declined. The parents of the two elemental masters passed away, and internal conflicts over inheritance raged. Shi Wudu tired of it all, so the year he turned 16, he left home and brought with him the little Shi Qingxuan, who was younger by many years. The brothers depended on each other to survive. Shi Wudu was the first to enter the mountains to cultivate under a master, and he settled his little brother in a town at the foot of the mountain. Every day he cultivated and trained until late, not returning home until it was deep into the night. There was also nothing to eat in the mountains, so he could only take meals at home. One fateful evening, Shi Wudu was caught up in sparring with another disciple and lost track of time. Shi Qingxuan waited and waited, but still his brother didn't come home. Worried that his brother was surely hungry by now, Shi Qingxuan decided to go up the mountain to deliver food. Shi Qingxuan was still a child at the time and didn't know how to hike the dark, rugged paths at night. After walking for a long time with the food box, he could no longer ignore the pressing need to relieve himself. Urgently, he pulled up his skirt at the side of the road. Just then, a figure cloaked in shadow approached from the far end of the mountain road. "Is it Xuanaer up ahead?" Hearing someone call his baby name, Shi Qingxuan thought his brother had sent someone to find him. He hurriedly dropped his skirt and answered, "It's me!" That unfamiliar voice asked, "Were you born in such year, at such month, such day, such time?" Shi Qingxuan was surprised. Why the sudden request for his birth information? And furthermore, that person had it all correct. So he answered, "That's right. How did you know? Who are you? Do you know my brother?" That voice didn't respond to his questions. It finally said, "Come here and let me see your face properly." That sounded like a command. At this point, Shi Qingxuan finally sensed something amiss. He clutched the food box close to his chest and bolted. As he ran, he heard whirling wild winds behind him, cackling madly. That thing was chasing him, and it was close behind. It shouted, "You're going to fall this instant." Shi Qingxuan was scared out of his wits, and when it said fall, he indeed tripped and fell, shattering the food box as he did. My cat is trying to go places he shouldn't, and is whacking his tail into the microphone. Thank you. Yeah, you're supposed to lay down, be an island. We're almost to the end. It's all right. Yeah, either, lay down and chill or hop down. Okay, thank you. Sir, I said thank you. There we go. He indeed tripped and fell, shattering the food box as he did. Rice spilled all over the ground. Just as the creature was about to pounce, Shi Wudu arrived. The Reverend of Empty Words vanished from sight when it saw someone had come. Shi Qingxuan's face was filthy with blood and rice from the fall, and Shi Wudu hugged his little brother close. Both of them were terrified and panicked. It had found him. Its prey was in its claws after so many years of searching, and the Reverend of Empty Words finally had its first taste of sweetness. From then on, it appeared regularly, each time more calculating than the last. The creature's cultivation was too strong. The Shi family fortune was already depleted, and the cultivators that Shiwudu managed to hire could do nothing. He lacked the power to throw a million merits to have his voice heard directly by the heavens. Although the creature never demanded Shi Qingxuan's life, the two brothers knew that it was only biding its time, waiting until its prey had been fattened before the butchery. For the time being, it was gently slapping his face as a reminder to be afraid. But there would come a day when the slap would truly hurt. It was like a hunter who refused to kill their prey with a single arrow and instead grazed it over and over, to thoroughly relish its terror. This was very much like a death by 1,000 cuts. Fortunately, a turning point finally came. After years of aggressive training, Shiwudu ascended. The moment he ascended, he immediately brought Shi Qingxuan to the middle court and aggressively showered him with rare spiritual treasures and divine riches. A few years later, Shi Qingxuan also successfully ascended. The Reverend of empty words thus quieted and disappeared. Shi Qingxuan very naturally assumed that the creature knew it had been beaten and had finally given up and backed off. But it seemed he was too optimistic. A few days prior, he was out drinking with a large group of friends, and in the midst of his drunkenness, he suddenly heard a ferocious voice in his ear. "You'll never see your brother again." That voice was exceedingly familiar. From the age of 10 on, he had heard it at least once or twice every year, until he finally ascended. The fear of that voice ran deep in his bones, and it was like thunder crashing in his ear. Shi Qingxuan sobered up instantly. Gripped with terror, he rushed to Pei Ming's domain and only relaxed when he personally saw Shiwudu alive and well, socializing with Ling Wen and Pei Ming. He wondered if that voice had simply been his own delusion. After all, the creature had scarred him profoundly when he was young, but he was still worried, so he set out on a mission to find Xie Lian and ask for his assistance, and dragged Mingyi along for the ride. He hadn't expected to bump into Hua Cheng at Pucci Shrine. When it comes to enemies, the road is truly narrow. After listening to the story, Xie Lian commented, "So the one Lord Windmaster met and the ones I met are on completely different levels." Briefly thinking it over, he turned to Hua Cheng. "Senlong, have you ever seen the Reverend of Empty Words?" Hua Cheng was toying with a pair of chopsticks in his hand. I've never seen it personally, but I know someone who has." Although Xie Lian was curious as to who this someone was, he didn't ask after them. He only said, "How strong is its cultivation exactly? Is it really that powerful?" Hua Cheng tossed the chopsticks and replied lazily, "Very strong." "Oh my god, I've never seen it personally, but I know someone who has." This bullshit. You know what? We're also gonna have to drink when some of that bullshit pops up. You know? That'd be a good drinking game. You'd be dead in an hour. Hua Cheng tossed the chopsticks and replied lazily, "Very strong." Hearing this, Shi Qingxuan and Mingyi's expressions grew somber and grave. "It's not a typical little minion," Hua Cheng added. "Certainly difficult to deal with." Although he said difficult to deal with, his expression remained unchanged, like he was only saying it out of courtesy. Regardless, it was not easy to elicit such a comment from Hua Cheng. "Lord Windmaster, this problem doesn't seem like a trifling matter," Xie Lian said. "Why not tell Lord Watermaster?" Shi Qingxuan waved his hand. No. You have to know, my brother is about to undergo another heavenly tribulation. What if he goes off and fights the Reverend of Empty Words only to lose focus? I have to keep this a secret. No one must know. I didn't say a word to anyone, not even to officials who have a good relationship with my brother." Heavenly officials could undergo multiple heavenly tribulations. They weren't necessarily once-in-a-lifetime events. The more tribulations passed, the greater one's divine rank, the more unshakable one's status, and the stronger one's spiritual power. Shiwudu had triumphed over 2 tribulations already, and Xie Lian had heard in the spiritual communication array's leisurely chatter that he was waiting for the 3rd one to occur any day now. It certainly wouldn't be good for him to lose focus. After all, failing to pass a tribulation meant, in turn, that one's divine rank would plummet. Oh, shit. Am I the only one a little bit more in love with Windmaster now? Could that just be me? That's probably not just me. I'm very much even more in love with Windmaster now. The poor baby. The poor baby who just like loves his brother and just wants to, but at the same time, he's a casual little fuckhead. Like, hello, made for me specifically. That was the end of the chapter. We now only have like 9 pages left. We are on chapter 51, called 3 Gods, 1 Ghost, Reverend Nowhere in Sight, part 1. Also, 3 Gods, 1 Ghost. I'm sorry. Porn memes have ruined my life. I want to try and take care of that thing myself, Shi Qingxuan continued sternly. All things considered, your highness has more experience with such entities. So are you free? If not, don't force yourself. Shi Qingxuan had helped Xie Lian on many occasions in the past. So now that Xie Qingxuan had come to him with an emergency, there was no way Xie Lian could decline and say he had the heart, but not the power. But Hua Cheng had come from far away as a guest, and he hadn't been here for more than a few days. If Xie Lian left, who was going to host Hua Cheng? Although it wasn't like Xie Lian himself was a very good host to begin with. As he considered his options, Hua Cheng smiled and propped his chin on one hand. Is Gaga going to try to catch a glimpse of that Reverend of empty words? If it wouldn't be a bother, will you bring me along? It's a rare monster, after all. I've never seen it myself. He must think Xie Lian's in danger. Either that or, oh my god, wouldn't that be wild if it was like the same No. Xie Lian just ran into a regular one. But wouldn't that be crazy if it was the same beast somehow? Either way, Hua Cheng is like, can I come protect you, please? It's my duty as a service top. Much ashamed, but Sanlong understands my predicament, Xie Lian thought to himself. Filled with gratitude for Hua Cheng's thoughtfulness on the matter, Xie Lian nodded. Shi Qingxuan didn't say anything on the subject. Of course he knew perfectly well that Hua Cheng wasn't coming along to help him, but he at least wasn't coming to cause trouble. In the end, whether Hua Cheng came or not meant nothing to him. The Reverend of Empty Words is an elusive creature, Xie Lian warned. Who knows when or where it will appear again? I couldn't tell you, Shi Qingxuan replied. If nothing else, I plan on going to the imperial capital and reserving the best room at the best restaurant to drink for around 80 to 100 days straight. We'll put on plays and set off firecrackers every day, and that will flush it out eventually. That's one way to do it, Xie Lian acknowledged. But even if it shows itself, we might not be able to capture it. The best way to win a battle is to know oneself and one's enemy. Has Lord Windmaster investigated its past prey? How does it hunt? We should see if there's any pattern. My brother already investigated that, of course, Shi Qingxuan retrieved a scroll from his sleeve and spread it open. Xie Lian scooted closer to take a look and was in awe in spite of himself. Amazing, amazing. Such taste. This creature really only fished for big catches. Every name on that scroll was a notable character in the mortal realm, and almost all of them had met tragic ends. Moreover, every one of said tragic ends was a suicide following a mental breakdown. There were those who had slit their throats after their troops met crushing defeat. There were those who had made a clean exit with a white bandage noose after their fortunes were ruined overnight. There were those who simply sank into the depths of despair after spending their entire lifetime seeking influence and affluence, only to achieve nothing for their struggle. They weren't necessarily defeated by the hand of the Reverend of Empty Words. They were overcome by their own fear of loss. Holy shit. Seriously, Venerables and Reverends of Empty Words might be like one of my new fucking favorite monsters. Period. Neither emperors nor kings were on that list. As sons of heaven, true rulers had a protective aura that prevented evil from easily invading their hearts. That would be nice. Generally speaking, those who had the potential to ascend also had natural spiritual shields enveloping their bodies that forced evil to stand down. This made Xie Lian suspect that whatever had attached onto Shi Qingxuan wasn't something so simple. Perhaps someone behind the scenes was purposely targeting him. If that were the case, that person must be quite formidable. But Shi Qingxuan had been only a baby when he was marked, so how had he attracted such a character? Just then, Hua Cheng spoke. Guga, may I take a look? Xie Lian passed the scroll to him. Here. Hua Cheng gave it a brief skim. Who put this scroll together? My brother. What of it? Shi Qingxuan replied. Hua Cheng tossed the scroll on the table. Nothing. Just that it's full of glaring mistakes. I suggest your brother try again. Hearing this, Shi Qingxuan was ready to throw a fit, or perhaps even fists. Crimson Rain sought flower. Xie Lian held him back and said apologetically, Lord and Master, please sit down. Sit down. Let it go. Sanlong always talks like that. He doesn't mean it. Always like that. Shi Qingxuan sounded doubtful, but sat down. Xie Lian turned to Hua Cheng. Sanlong, you said it's full of outrageous mistakes. How so? Hua Cheng scooted over to him. They were now sitting much closer than before. Hua Cheng pointed at a few names. These are wrong. Xie Lian looked at the names closely. All of them were known to be lawless, malevolently evil tyrants. How do you know? Because I killed them. Knew it. Wait, they were all malevolently evil? He's been going around killing evil things? You really? Doesn't this say they all died by suicide? Xie Lian asked. I sent messengers to greet them, and they killed themselves before I made any further move, Hua Cheng explained. Perhaps that doesn't count as my kill. One couldn't truly say whether that counted, but at least he was honest. Shi Qingxuan's lips twitched, and he coughed uncomfortably a few times. Can ghosts please not so bluntly describe how they kill people in front of heavenly officials? Can ghosts also please not openly discuss this with other heavenly officials in front of other heavenly officials? Hua Cheng pointed at a few other names. These are wrong too. And who killed them? Xie Lian asked. Blackwater did them in, Hua Cheng said. Xie Lian was taken aback. Blackwater Demon Xuan. Doesn't he always lie low? Doesn't mean he doesn't kill, Hua Cheng said. Then he addressed Shi Qingxuan. Thank you, sir. That esteemed brother of yours gave you a scroll that's inaccurate and full of errors. There's no heart in this investigation at all. That bundle of rags is nothing but a red herring meant to divert your attention. I suggest you rip it up and get to work researching another one. Shi Qingxuan snatched back the scroll. My brother isn't like that. Although his retort was weak, his voice was firm. Shi Wudu wouldn't be so careless when it came to his own younger brother, so there could be only one possibility. Every profession has its own specialists. Lord Watermaster would surely have borrowed another's expertise for this investigation. Xie Lian asked Qingxuan, May I inquire who actually put the scroll together? After some hesitation, Shi Qingxuan replied, Ling Wen. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead and stopped speaking. Sir? Yeah. Lay down. Stop trying to escape to parts of the desk you're not allowed on. There we go. Yeah, we're just at the last couple of pages, man. Calm down. Sir? You make me nervous. Did you hear that coo? You see what I put up with? Xie Lian rubbed his forehead and stopped speaking. Although other heavenly officials cursed the palace of Ling Wen for its inefficiency, it still wouldn't be expected to make so many mistakes. This looked like a rough draft turned in to appease a deadline. The tumors seemed to share a good relationship, at least on the surface, but outsiders would probably never know what lay beneath. Let me tell you another way to discern the difference between what's true and what's fake. Hua Cheng leaned back and continued, Hua Cheng leaned back and continued, once the Reverend of empty words sets its sights on prey, it goes for the roots as well. Not only will its targets suffer and die, the families and friends of said target will also be affected. As such, regarding those on this scroll whose own lives were the only casualty in their affair, whose friends and families remain alive and well, those names are wrong. Shi Qingxuan's face paled for a moment when he heard this, but he quickly regained his cheer and laughed dryly at Ming Yi. Ming Xiang, doesn't that mean you're in danger too? You're my best friend after all. Ming Yi shifted to sit farther away from Shi Qingxuan, his expression written with the sentiment that he'd rather not have Shi Qingxuan as the best friend, please and thank you. This move brought him closer to Xie Lian. Hua Cheng's gaze swept over Ming Yi, sharp as a knife. Seeing that Shi Qingxuan hadn't forgotten to joke around even in times like these, Xie Lian couldn't help but smile. Nevertheless, he could tell Shi Qingxuan was still anxious. Rather, it was because of his anxiety that he had to use extra cheer to suppress it. I don't know anything about that. Shi Qingxuan flashed his Windmaster fan and fluttered it 5-6 times faster than usual, his black hair flying wildly in the wind. Let's go right now, to drink ourselves into oblivion atop the tallest, fanciest tower. I have to see it for myself if it'll dare show its face with so many of us around. We've got strength in numbers. Lord Windmaster, please calm yourself, Xie Lian urged him. Wait for me for a moment. I've got a few small things to take care of in the shrine. Who knew how many days this trip would take? With 2 children and 2 mouths, plus a godforsaken ghost possessing a man, he couldn't just leave them be. He considered trying to find someone reliable in the village to watch over them, but it seemed Hua Cheng knew his every worry and spoke up. If Gaga must go, then go without worries. I've got hands to spare. Someone will take care of the shrine while you're gone. Xie Lian breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness for Sanlong. It'll be better if there's someone here to watch over things. Hua Cheng smiled. Yeah, there needs to be someone watching over things. Watching over obviously meant different things to the both of them, but neither pried deeper. That makes me nervous. Ming Yi moved the altar table away and began drawing the teleportation array on the ground. Shi Qingxuan's fan fluttered so rapidly that its form could barely be made out. By the way, Your Highness, I forgot to ask earlier, who exactly is that outside the door? How did I piss him off to provoke such rude words from his mouth? To be asked about only at the end of things, and in such an offhand manner, if Qirong overheard, he'd no doubt suffer another attack of heartburn. As Xie Lian busied himself packing up Roye and Feng Shen, he thought it really was quite impersonable of Shi Qingxuan. On the other hand, Qirong hardly counted as a person. Didn't he announce his own title? What, that really is the Green Ghost? Shi Qingxuan was surprised. With that face and that attitude, you really do have to see these kinds of things for yourself. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead and briefly gave an account of what had transpired these last few days, and upon concluding the tale, reminded Shi Qingxuan to keep it a secret, especially when it came to Lang Chengchu. While they spoke, Ming Yi finished drawing the teleportation array. The one Nen Feng drew last time had been crude and rough, and it had taken him ages to finish. Ming Yi was the complete opposite. His hands were swift and precise, completing the drawing with but a single sweeping motion. The circle he drew was cleaner and more accurate than if one used a compass and ruler, and the characters were so neat and orderly they could have been mistaken for pressed prints. Xie Lian couldn't help but marvel. With the array completed, Ming Yi said, "Let's go." Shi Qingxuan sucked in a breath and blew gently to extinguish the candlelight. Hua Cheng took the lead and was the first to push open the door. The little door creaked open into pitch blackness beyond. The air was thick with mold and dust, as if the door was connected to an old house that had been abandoned for many years. Following behind Hua Cheng was Xie Lian, who softly thanked Hua Cheng for taking the initiative to open the door as he passed. Then came Shi Qingxuan, and last was Ming Yi. Once he crossed through, he closed the door behind him. The moment it shut, an ominous voice came from the darkness behind the door. The place you wish to go will become the nightmare you never wish to recall. The instant Xie Lian heard this, he let loose with a kick. The door instantly collapsed from the impact. It was no longer Pucci's shrine behind the door, but rather a pile of trash. Once a teleportation array was used, it lost its effect. That intense kick roused thick clouds of dust, and Xie Lian coughed. He was glad it wasn't the door Hua Cheng had made for him. With his sleeve covering his face, he asked, "Was that the Reverend of Empty Words?" Shi Qingxuan tightly gripped his whisk and his Windmaster fan. "That's his voice. Has it been following me?" Xie Lian waved away the dusty air. "No, there were 3 heavenly officials and 1 ghost king in the shrine earlier. If something were following you, how could none of us notice? Clearly it only just arrived." "Calm down," Ming Yi advised Shi Qingxuan. "I'm calm," Shi Qingxuan exclaimed. "I'm very calm. I calmed down a long time ago." Hua Cheng stood ahead and said leisurely, "Calm is good, but there's definitely something afoot. Does anyone know where we are?" Xie Lian looked around and wondered this as well. "Weren't we headed to the nicest restaurant in the imperial capital?" "Yeah, that's my question." No matter how he looked at it, this old abandoned house looked nothing like any restaurant Shi Qingxuan had spoken of. The 4 of them explored the place and found the entrance, but it was closed with massive locks. The matter of the locks was addressed by another kick from Xie Lian, and the door creaked open. What appeared before them was neither hell nor any such sort of mysterious evil landscape. It was a perfectly ordinary, dull little town. Hua Cheng arched his brows. The imperial capital shouldn't look like this. Xie Lian agreed wholeheartedly. The aura of an imperial capital could not be matched by such a small town. He turned his head. "Lord Earthmaster, did you make a mistake in your array?" "I didn't make any mistakes," Ming Yi stated. "This wasn't our original destination." Xie Lian immediately understood. It meant the creature had meddled. It had sent them here. Yeah! Oh, shit! Oh, shit! Oh, I'm almost certain that's bad. Oh, fuck me. And that's how we go. That's how the volume ends. That's just how it ends. They were sent somewhere by a Reverend of Empty Words. Shit. What the fuck? What the fuck? I am so excited for this case. Oh my god. I love it. I love everything about it. I love that Hua Cheng's there. I love that my man Windmaster's there and getting his own little like fleshed out character stuff going on. I fucking love the concept of the Empty Words creatures. Those are so good and so interesting. And oh man, I love everywhere this is going. I mean, except for the fact that they clearly just landed in like a shit ton of danger. That gives me anxiety. But what doesn't give me anxiety? No, I love it. I love it. I'm so excited. I cannot wait. May is the month of Modazushi Volume 5, but after that, we get to do Heaven Officials Blessing Volume 4. That is June, everybody. That is Pride Month. Pride Month is Volume 4. Yes, thank you. Perfect. So, that is it for Volume 3. Holy crap. Oh my god, what a tease. They're doing such a good job. I will see you very soon with similarly pre-recorded videos for readings of Modazushi Volume 5. Because I hear that one's a little spicy, so I can't do those live. I'm doing them pre-recorded. But I will see you for those very soon. I think in like a week or so. Similarly, 2 hours long, because I'm really liking this 2 hours long deal. This is good. So yeah, I will see you then. I'm terribly excited. I'm so excited. I will see you for more Modazushi, and then eventually for Pride Month for more Heaven Officials Blessing. I hope you had fun. I had a real damn blast as always. And please remember, to take care of yourself.